Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How's everybody?
Good.
Y'all still got summer school? Excuse me. Y'all still got summer school? Are you having the time of your lives?
I'm having a great time. Let me tell you. It's different. It's a different experience. This one is.
What's different about it?
Well, it's rising seventh graders. I think the age group is definitely different. Poses some challenges. I haven't worked with middle school before. And then a lot of these students are kind of at risk, so that definitely adds another layer to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them are coming out of Warlick, or some of them are at Warlick. So it's but they're all good kids. I mean, they're all kids, right? You get to talking to them, and they've all got stories they want to share, and trying to form relationships with them. So it's a population I've not worked with before. Haven't been at Highland for 6 years. It's a really good experience for me. But like today, I was just telling my wife today, a kid came up to me. He had a triangle paper taped to his nose, and he had a mustache drawn on it. And he said, "Mr. Bowles, I'm you."
So I just pay some of my bills then, boy.
Yeah, I know. It's been different, but same challenges with busing and all that. So
yeah. But so anybody else want to share their summer experiences?
So I would have to say that Paris and I probably had every incidence of the law that we could have. So we had someone who said that they wanted to die.
Oh, Lordy.
Yes. And so we had to go through that whole process. And I would have to say we did a great job just putting our heads together, because I think that day we had no administration, correct, Paris, in the building? So I just knew from experience what we should do. And we reached out to the social worker, the on-call social worker. We found where our counselor was, and they were able to come together, do an assessment, get the parents involved, give out some resources. And she came to school the next day in better spirits.
Well, that's good. Our last activity, a couple of those case studies, if you read both of them, the one about the female softball, there's one about a school that let a kid go home and didn't bother to, because all the paperwork and all the ordeal that you had to go through. And so, yes, you've got to follow through on all those things. And it's a liability issue. Yes, it's a mental health issue, but it's a bigger liability issue. That's how I wanted to start out. Wanda, I hope your health is good. Let's see, Lauren, I hope you're doing better. I hope Pierce is doing okay. Where's Emily? I hope Pierce is doing okay. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. Welcome. Glad to have you with us. I followed up on I don't know, have I talked to y'all since I did, I guess it was the day after the 4th. So I hadn't talked to y'all since I spent the afternoon with Dr. Jill Payne doing her training. And so Dr. Payne is going to teach y'all 604 in the fall. And she's been very involved with you, and we're going to integrate some of the things into your Saturday, she and I. And so, and now that's the good news. Now the bad news is I'm going to be your coach in the fall. I'll be working with her as your coach, since this is her first time out. So we did her Blackboard training. I guess that was July 5th, and but I'll do task stream with y'all, and I'll do your evidence work. And so I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. So Megan's having internet issues. We'll get her. We're going to, y'all need to keep on going once you finish the OMA and get into that skip, because by the time the fall is over, we're going to have the skip and the cap done, so that in the spring you only have to do the PSYOP, because there's a lot of good things in the spring, a lot of activities with Dr. Stone. And also that will allow you to finish up your competency folio and do a good job with it. I've been grading those. I got a couple of you turned in today. And that's a reminder. So I want to share my screen and we'll circle back to liability, but just our housekeeping things here. Make sure you remember that for MELS 603, you owe me the OMA this summer and your School of Ed dispositions, make sure you do those. For 604, as you can see, you're going to owe me the skip and the cap. And then you got all these things due in your final semester, which is your SOP, your disposition analysis. You got a survey, but you got that competency folio. It's due in the last semester. So we're going to do 2 evidences. So, just keep right on going with the skip. Got a couple of you that are already doing that. So that's great. Keep up with your hours. I saw those today. That's good. And in your competency folio, I'll just pick one at random. Make sure you follow the directions on each of them. The AppSell, SOP, open-ended. Obviously, you can only do 2 before your last semester when we get the SOP there, but make sure that you read the directions. AppSell, SOP on that one. Creative thinking is AppSell, AppTell, and open-ended. You already ought to have that one knocked out. So make sure that you keep up with your competency folio. We're not going to revisit it really. I'm just going to remind you, but you can work on it any time. But we have to finish it up in that last semester along with the SOP and all those things. So we're going to do the skip and the cap this fall. So if you can get started on the skip now, that'll be fine. You don't really have to have anybody with it because you're just analyzing teacher working condition survey data. And I showed you how to do that from TWC on the parent and community section on it. So you should be able to just keep going right on through the summer, get that thing knocked out, because we're going to have a lot of activities in the fall. Dr. Payne and I on Saturdays, I'm going to try. Now I can't promise, but I am going to try to get to some of your Saturday events. Now, I have classes on Saturday. Our doctoral programs are low residency. And so my doc classes, we have Saturday, Sunday classes on them. So I can't, but I'm not going to be teaching my Saturday doc class that meets every other Saturday in the fall. I'm just going to have the low residency version. I'm not going to have the full residency version. Now, I teach a doctoral methodology. I'm a statistician by trade, quantitative. And so we do every other Saturday. We have full residency on that one. But I'm not teaching it in the fall. So I have the opportunity. I've taught it last fall and last spring. And so I have not had the opportunity to be with y'all as much as I would have liked to. But I hope to remedy some of that this coming fall, since I only have one low residency doc in the fall. So I'm going to try to make sure I can come to as many of those as possible. I won't add anything. I'll just be there to aggravate you. That's part of the process as well. But she and I have already worked on your content for the fall, and we're really excited. Main thing is we want to get you all your experiences in, and even if they won't let you, but you'll be ready to be certified to do formal observations by the time the fall is over. We're going to try to have you where we can get you that done so that wherever you're placed, whatever jobs you get, that you'll be able to walk in and start doing observations, because that's a biggie. You don't want to put a burden on the rest of the team. So we're excited about that. We're going to be doing a lot of those kinds of things in the fall. It is the curriculum class, and I'm excited about that. So that's what we're doing right now. That's kind of up to date as to where we are. I want to talk about liability a little bit. I want to talk about the 3 functions of negligence. There's 3 types. There's malfeasance, misfeasance, and nonfeasance. It's in your reading. And to the point that Wanda made, And thank you, Wanda, for bringing that up. Generally what happens in cases like that, you get hit with nonfeasance. What that means is you had a duty to act and you didn't. You didn't do the wrong thing. You didn't do the right thing. You didn't do anything. And so this is not, what was it? I don't know if it was Homer or Bart. One of the Simpsons said, if you don't do nothing, you can't get hurt. That's not the case. If you had a duty to act and didn't, you're in trouble. And that's what we're talking about when a child comes in and says, I'm going to harm somebody else, they're going to harm myself. And you say, well, just don't do it on my time and send them on home. And something bad happens. That would be called nonfeasance. That's that standard of negligence. And then, of course, we have misfeasance, which means you did the wrong thing. You didn't knowingly do the wrong thing, but you did the wrong thing. And then we have malfeasance, and that's, from our first case study with the teacher with Bobby, that would be malfeasance. She intentionally did the wrong thing in order to harm a student. So those are your three standards. Malfeasance, intentionally did the wrong thing. Misfeasance, you did the wrong thing, didn't mean to, but you did. And then nonfeasance, you had a duty to act and didn't. Now that circles back around to our bus incident. We've got, y'all doing buses this summer. I can't tell you this enough, and I'm so glad that all of you, every response I've seen so far, you've hit the nail on the head. Don't think, call 911 immediately. Do not hesitate. You are not a medical doctor. And they say, well, I didn't think anybody was hurt. Don't think you're hurting the team. Well, it'll be a bad PR. I don't care about the PR. Don't call the bus garage first. Don't call the area superintendent. Don't call 911 first and get medical attention on the way. Even if it's minor, call 911, then call the bus garage, or then call your supervisor or whatever. And then put your phone in your pocket and hush. Don't talk to anybody. Don't say anything to anyone, parents. Don't say anything, especially to the news media. You've got a public information officer in Gaston County, and you're never to speak to the media and under any circumstances or parents without their approval, ever. And so that's where that misfeasance came in. You didn't mean to do the wrong thing, but you said something that you shouldn't have said, or you said something that wasn't accurate, and then then the liability comes in. Well, I didn't think anybody was hurt. I said nobody was hurt. Well, you didn't intentionally mislead anybody, but what you told was wrong. And then, boy, I'm telling you what, they sued your pants off. They didn't get my child the help they needed because they thought nobody was hurt. Those kinds of things. So you need to understand, in liability, you need to understand the three standards of negligence. And I'm hoping that you're getting some experience with that in your assignments this summer, that you can see how easy it would be to get caught up in that. Just not thinking. When you're on Gardner-Webb's campus, and this is, Barry Johnson is our chief of police at Gardner-Webb, and I just love Barry. We're great friends. We look like Mutt and Jeff. He's just a little fellow, but I love his dry sense of humor. But he bought some signs and put up around campus. I mean, the diamond shaped ones around campus that look like real signs, but there's some that he had made. And the one out at kind of the traffic circle out near the tennis courts out past the gym out there where there's always a wreck, he had a big sign put up and it simply says, "Pay attention." I love that sign. That should be our motto in school administration, is pay attention. Have your brain engaged every day. You can't come to work as a school administrator and just kick it out of gear and turn your brain off. You got to be thinking every day. And you got to be thinking, you got to be playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. You got to be thinking 2 or 3 moves down the line. If this, then that. I love that sign. Pay attention. If you don't, you're going to get caught up in a negligence deal. Either miss, mal, or non. One of the three. If you're not thinking, if you can't Call somebody, phone a friend, get a lifeline. But don't just kind of muddle your way through the day and turn your brain off. Be looking, be thinking, keep your heads up. It's like we used to say all the time when I played outside linebacker, you got to have your head on the swivel. If not, the tight end will come across the middle and blindside you and kill you. Break every rib that you got on that side. You got to have your head on the swivel. That's the way you got to be for school administration. And I am glad that you're finding out that even in summer programs that you have to deal with legalistic or liability kinds of things every day. It's just a constant. That's our business. That's what we do. I told you when we started this course, this is about how you run school. This is the day-to-day how to survive in this industry. It's a different perspective than being in the classroom. Completely, you got to change your lens. You got to do that. But I am very pleased. I'm very proud of the work that you're doing. Your writing is great. The scores on your OMA coming back. I've seen nothing but great scores on the OMA this summer. I don't know how you got them. You didn't have very good teacher, but you got them. That's all that matters. And so I'm very pleased with your OMA scores. You've been very thoughtful in your assignment work. Your answers have been complete and to the point. You're getting better on your case studies. Tonight we'll see, how good you've gotten. I'm old. Don't get me too excited. So I'm hoping they're going to be great tonight. But if not, I'll let you know. All right. So we have a special request tonight from Monica to go first. She's got something going on. And so tonight's lineup will be going first will be Monica, Emily, Wanda, and Megan. And then Marsha, Paris, Alex, and Heather. Then third will be Wood, Savannah, and Lauren. And then fourth will be Daphne, Charlene, and Angie. All right. So we're ready.
Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so for question 1, would you consider Mary Lou's comment a veiled threat? The definition of a veiled threat is a warning or etc. is not expressed directly or clearly because you do not want your meaning to be too obvious. So our thoughts were, yes, the administrator used a veiled threat by asking the boys to resume their relationship after graduation since it was quickly approaching. The administrator also used terms such as talk some sense when talking to the boys' parents and you can wait when asking the boys to resume the relationship later on. Although the administrator might think she is trying to avoid any disruptions or she thinks this might have had on the school or learning, she as a result could be bullying the students by discriminating against their free speech and expressions rights.
I had question 2. What are Mary Lou's responsibility under the law? The Title IX law prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. Mary Lou should also be aware that Jimmy and Willie must be able to participate in school functions in the same manner as other couples or other students that are heterosexual. Discrimination of sex orientation, sexual harassment, or bullying is not tolerable and could lead to litigation. And if the parents or Jimmy and Willie feel violated, they could file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights. And then the programs that Jimmy and Willie want to host to raise awareness for the LGBTQI community would be subjected to the same guidelines given to all students.
So I had question number 3. How should Mary Lou respond to the concerns of Cindy and Jerry Hudson? Our thoughts were that Mary Lou should respond that she cannot address matters that involve students other than their child. She should also let the parents know that district level personnel have been informed of the situation to ensure the rights of all students are protected.
Question 4, should Mary Lou allow Jimmy and Willie to attend the prom as a couple? If she doesn't, she's just simply breaking the law and she's infringing on Jimmy and Willie's constitutional rights. According to the Frick versus Lynch case, a student can bring a student of the same sex to a high school dance, and the court ruled that existing free speech doctrine protected gay and lesbian students' rights to attend their prom with same-sex dates. There was also the Tinker versus Des Moines case, which states that neither students nor teachers shed their constitutional rights of freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. And the court took the position that the school officials could not prohibit only the suspicion that the speech might disrupt the learning environment. So Mary Lou cannot just assume it's going to disrupt the learning environment. LGBT students are afforded the same equal protection and access under the Equal Access Act of 1984. And some courts have ruled under Title IX of the Education Amendment that schools who receive federal funding cannot discriminate based on gender.
So next, we took a look at the 4 paradigms of ethics. First, justice. Mary Lou's actions do not appear to be fair and equitable, as she did not consider the constitutional rights of Jimmy and Willie. Care. She did not appear to exhibit caring for student needs, as she wanted the students to sweep the situation under the carpet by asking them to wait until after graduation. As far as critique is concerned, there are a few different things. Mary Lou was not open to Jimmy and Willie's ideas of promoting an environment of inclusivity for all students by their ideas. And profession, Mary Lou's actions do not account for all students and their success of learning.
Okay, and some of the ideas that we came up with for making sure that bullying and cyberbullying was not occurring was to make sure that the school handbook has a clear policy for bullying and cyberbullying, and make sure that the consequences of both are clearly stated. Monitoring student devices and encourage parents to monitor student activity online when students are outside of school. Create a positive school climate where students feel safe and are aware of consequences for bullying and cyberbullying, and ensure that students have ample access to guidance counselors.
Okay, very good. I have a few questions that we'll move through now. Does this case have anything to do with antecedent behaviors? Somebody explain antecedent behaviors to me and how that plays into this case.
That's those minor things going. Are we allowed to talk, or is that?
Yeah,
group?
that's what I want to hear.
That's like the hand holding.
You got a face for radio. I want to hear you.
I certainly do. Those minor things that turn into bigger things later on. So essentially, you have the PDA holding hands, things like that aren't addressed early on will lead to larger things, or maybe are addressed arbitrarily. They might be addressed with a heterosexual couple. They might not be addressed with a homosexual couple for fear of,
Right.
whatever. So that's what that
Great,
is.
great point. So we've got 2 of our pre-existing things that we've covered. One is antecedent behaviors. But nobody bothered to stop Jimmy and Willie, and their behavior got more and more and more over the top until finally the community just rose up in arms. Well, that's self-inflicted dumbassery. You did that to yourself. You could have stopped this. Now, somebody said, well, we're not sure if it's in the handbook or not. Let's remember, it's in the state manual. Inappropriate display of affection is in the state manual. Now, it says that's an infraction that you can't allow in your school. Now, your local code of conduct in Gaston County does what? It gives the punishment for that, the consequence, but the state has the right in a state school to say, we won't have this. You don't get to choose whether you want to enforce it or not, because the state says this is not allowable in places we send money to. And how much money do they send every year per pupil? About $8,000. And for that, you have to follow their rules. And that's why that manual comes in. And you must tell them what goes on, but you must stop these things. Now, they let the local board of education in Gaston County adopt the code of conduct that says this consequences falls between here and here, but you don't get to decide whether you enforce it or not. Now, what you do is up to your local board, who adopts the code of conduct. But you don't get to choose whether that's an infraction on your campus or not. So that's the first thing. They let Jimmy and Willie get out of control, and the little thing became a big thing. That's number one. Number two, on that same idea, and Wood made a good point. Now, if we make Jimmy and Willie keep them hands and lips to themselves, what do we got to do with the boys and girls? We have to do the same with them. We can't be arbitrary. And we can't do that. Now, one of the things that I always used to have to talk to middle school and junior high girls about is boys are stupid. I know I was one. And what that means is boys at that age can't discern. So Paris likes Wood, but not me. So she allows Wood to act a certain way with her. But then when I think I get a turn, she gets mad at me. And but see, the deal is she can't let Wood act that way either. That's the notion here. And so this is not just a boy problem. This is a boy and girl problem. And it doesn't matter about the genders or about the sexuality. It doesn't matter. What you have to explain is we have a code of conduct in this school that says you won't do these things, whether it's boy, boy, girl, girl, or boy, girl. It doesn't matter. But we've allowed a little thing to just completely overtake us. And you're right. Mary Lou's comments were a veiled threat. No, she can't talk to Jim and what's her name, Cindy and whatever the other kids can't talk to him. FERPA keeps us from doing that. They come, Jerry and Cindy come in and acting all indignant. We can't talk about somebody else's child, Jerry and Cindy. We know that FERPA laws, federal laws is very clear in that. And so now I'm glad you mentioned OCR. As I showed you in the state handbook, Power School collects all of our OCR data now, Office of Civil Rights. And so 14th Amendment, equal protection, all these federal laws, this is a federal thing. We cannot take action against Jimmy and Willie for being gay. That's against federal law. It's against state law as well. So a question came up in last night's class: does it matter if it's a public school, a charter school, or private school? And the answer to that is no. You don't drop your rights at the schoolhouse door. Now, the caveat to that is church school. Church schools, you have to be a member of the congregation and you have to sign basically a rights waiver on these kinds of things. But please remember, church schools are not, that's a misnomer. It's a congregation. It's not really a school. And if they were to take federal funds, they'd have to behave themselves as well. But that's how they get around some of the civil rights laws, is they're not really a school. It's just a congregation, and you're a member of that congregation. You voluntarily give up your rights. But public, private, charter, doesn't matter. These are all there. State laws on bullying, federal laws that are in place. I like that you cited Tinker versus Des Moines. Your rights don't stop at the schoolhouse door. That's good. You didn't mention heckler's veto. What is heckler's veto? Anybody know what heckler's veto is? Yeah, Wood.
I have a basic, so I kind of Googled it because you mentioned it last week. And it was the idea that you could basically shoot somebody down if you thought that the crowd's reaction to their speech was going to be volatile,
Well,
to the extreme.
yeah,
right?
well,
But
that's what Mary Lou did.
Yeah.
What she said to Jimmy and Willie is you can't come to the prom because somebody else might harm you. Well, we don't do mob rule the loudest and the stupidest. If he did, I'd be the king of the world. And so what heckler's veto means is, and it's in your reading, in your law book, is that We can't punish one person because of the possible actions of another. That's punishing the victim. We can't say to Jimmy and Willie, we're taking your rights to come to the prom because Dale and Wood might do something bad to you. Well, then you need to call and get some extra support so Dale and Wood can't do something bad to you. Or you know, Alex and Wood are going to, you know, they're young and stout. They're going to get after you. No, that's what heckler's veto is. And what that does is it keeps us from victimizing the victim any further, is the notion. And the last point that I want to make on this one, again, an excellent presentation, is don't get hung up on the fact that Jimmy and Willie are gay. This could be any protected class of people. We could substitute Black, we could substitute women, we could substitute men, we could substitute Jewish, we could substitute Irish, Arabic, Muslim. The whole notion here is that Jimmy and Willie are gay is immaterial to what your rights are. That's the notion here, is we can't allow these things. I mean, fill in the blank nowadays. People are mad about everything now. And so that it's a bigger issue than just LGBTQ. It's a human rights issue. You know, when my mother came to this country, you know, it was a bad time for people from Ireland when she came. You know, that, you know, we don't even think about things like that. So the world evolves, but the whole notion is, doesn't matter what you are. You know, one of my favorite doctoral students of all time at Gardner-Webb is Muslim. She's from Jordan. You know, her husband is Jordanian and Muslim as well. Now, he's not one of my favorite doctoral students of all time, but she is. He was one of mine as well. And I, you know, I like Hazim just fine. But now, Razan is just, you know, I think I might even shown you a picture of me and Razan. Razan is just my favorite of all time. What a quality person she is, smart, good, the whole deal. Why anybody would discriminate against her is just beyond, but it happened. It happened. And it still bothers me to this day. But so the notion here is put the gay part aside and understand that you can't abridge anybody's rights and you can't discriminate and you can't continue to punish the victim. You know, I had a student from Haywood County in my class, been a few years back, and she said, well, you know, I wouldn't let them come to prom, and they, you know, no jury in Haywood County would convict me. And I'm like, you're a nitwit. The court case wouldn't be held in Haywood County. It'd be held to federal court in Asheville. That won't go well for you, by the way. This is a federal issue. And so you got to know this is bigger than the county that you're in or the community that you're in. Federal law is federal law anywhere you go. So excellent job. Very good. Let's move on to our next group. Marcia, your group. Paris, Alex, Heather.
All right, I'm going to start with question number 1. Would you consider Mary Lou's comments a veiled threat? We started with defining what a veiled threat is. It's a warning that is not expressed directly or clearly because you do not want your meaning to be too obvious. Yes, Mary Lou's comments to the boys and their parents could be viewed as a veiled threat. In her conversation, she encouraged parents to talk some sense into the boys. She also mentioned the risk of harm from other students, which is unclear since the parents seem to be the ones with the greatest concerns. Additionally, she asked the boys to resume their relationship after graduation. Mary Lou's responsibility as the principal is to protect all students and not to submit to pressure in any side of an issue. If she's following the law, then Mary Lou has nothing to worry about legally.
So let me interrupt you. She also mentioned the risk of harm from other students. That would be called heckler's veto. That's where that part comes in. Very good. Continue.
Okay, and up next, we had what are Mary Lou's responsibilities under the law? Well, kind of like we were talking about earlier, Dr. Lamb, with saying pay attention. So prior to this event, Mary Lou should have been making sure that all her students were following the student code of conduct relating to public displays of affection, and that this could have been prevented, the situation from getting out of hand. So she should turn a blind eye to any students, regardless of sexual orientation, when they're not complying with school rules. So, like you said, be present as an administrator and pay attention to those things before they get out of hand. So her legal job is to make sure she maintains a safe and orderly school environment for all students. And all students have free speech rights protected by the Constitution, the First Amendment and 14th Amendment. Her job is to protect students' rights, but she must also listen to the concerns of parents as well. A good idea would be to consult, the district level school attorney for advice, guidance, like, in Gaston County, Mr. McGraw. And some things we said to think about, which the other group mentioned too, were Tinker versus Des Moines, the 1969 US Supreme Court case. The High Court agreed that students' free rights should be protected and said students don't shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gates. Also, as you referred to, heckler's veto, student speech cannot be suppressed for the sole reason someone may be offended or create an outburst in response to the speech. The Tinker standard remains protected unless there is an actual disruption or there are facts to reasonably conclude that there will be a disruption. And that was in the reading in chapter 5. And then also another thing to think about is the Title IX that prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school or any other education program that receives funding from the federal government. So like you were talking about, it wouldn't be the same for like a private Christian school. And then another thing we thought about was the Frick versus Lynch, the 1980 case where the district court in Rhode Island upheld the right of Aaron Frick to bring a same-sex date to the high school dance. So that's what we had for her responsibilities under the law.
Very good.
Sorry, I can figure out how to unmute myself. How should Mary Lou respond to the concerns of Jerry and Cindy Hudson? As the principal and leader of the school, it is Mary Lou's job to listen to the concerns of Jerry and Cindy Hudson. However, she is not allowed to legally discuss other students. She could discuss with them that the rights of all students are protected under the First Amendment and in the policies laid out in the county school handbook and/or student code of conduct. The leaders of the county should be made aware of the situation and the threat of the Hudsons. There are people within the school district, like the Director of Community Relations, that help schools diffuse situations such as this. Should Mary allow Jimmy and Willie to attend the prom as a couple? Legally, Mary Lou should allow the boys to attend the prom together. Restricting Jimmy and Willie from the prom would be discrimination and a violation of their rights. Equal Protection Clause under the 14th Amendment and Frick versus Lynch. All students, including Jimmy and Willie, would be expected to follow the school's code of conduct in relation to public displays of affection, etc., such as maybe a prom contract to sign as prom expectations are reviewed. And the principal may want to have extra staff chaperoning the prom and extra security just in case.
And then as far as minimalizing bullying or cyberbullying, a couple points that I had were to make sure that students, staff, and parents are educated on bullying, cyberbullying policies that should be clearly defined in the student code of conduct. Consequences should be known by all stakeholders and enforced. Possibly provide or support district-wide programs / initiatives to educate students on bullying and cyberbullying and what mental and emotional effects they may have an example that I gave in Gaston County schools. I know in the middle schools, they have a program where former college basketball player Sean Golden went around, and it was called Stand Up Gaston, where he discussed his experiences with bullying. And I don't know if he went to all the schools, but it was a county-wide initiative. So that would be something that would be an example of something that the district and administration could support. Provide PD for staff to empower them to better recognize signs of bullying or cyberbullying and report accordingly. And then counselors may be made available to teach curriculum on bullying or cyberbullying and provide a space where students feel comfortable reporting bullying episodes anonymously.
For ethical paradigms, for justice, it is the principal's job to uphold the law and make sure that all students are allowed to exercise their constitutional rights while creating a safe learning environment. For care, the principal demonstrated care by listening to all views and opinions of the students and parents. This helped establish trust and relationships with all parties involved. However, the principal must abide by the law in the decision-making process. Critique, the principal must use her power to make decisions in an unbiased way that is not based on personal opinions or perceptions. And for profession, the principal must safeguard the values of democracy, equity, and diversity by protecting the rights of all students and model ethical behavior.
Excellent. Most excellent. That's me and Razan right there. That's her. But anybody would discriminate against her or anybody else and think that that was okay is unbelievable to me. Excellent job on this one. I love your presentation. I've got a couple of you I want to ask some specific questions to. Alex, I've got a coach in my other section of 603 on Tuesday night. And one of the things that the conversation that we have entered into a bunch of times is this semester is especially at maybe the middle school level, and sometimes even at the high school level, this desire for double jeopardy, that we want to punish a kid and then we want the coach to punish the kid as well. Do you find that to be the case where you are?
I would say in my experience, sometimes I do think that there are teachers who really look out for our student athletes. I think there are those that, I mean, for lack of a better word, target them. And there are those that, you know, have their back. I see it a lot. I don't see it as much with our staff at Holbrook, but I have seen it in some other places that I've been. The high school that I was at previous to where I am now, it was always like they would do something, there would be a consequence given them to them in class, and then, you know, they would say, well, you know, you need to, or they would come to you and say, you need to do something with them. Well, you know, did you write them up? You know, have you told administration? No, they just wanted it to be handled by the coach as some sort, you know, whether it be running them to death or, you know, whatever. So yeah, I mean, I have seen it in some instances, but where I am now, most of our teachers are very supportive of our
Excellent.
athletes.
Excellent. So the point is, back kind of to our first case study with Bobby, the teacher took a run at him, maybe because he was a baseball player. Some folks do that, but we won't rehash that case study. But the notion here is you can't punish Jimmy and Willie for the actions of others, but you can't do double jeopardy. You can't punish them for one thing and then punish them for another. Like, you know, you got to be careful on the double jeopardy standards. Most of the time that's for athletes, but too many times teachers will do one thing to them and then want the coach to do something. No, you one or the other. You can't do both. We have to make sure that we understand that's capricious. That's the standard of capricious. That's more punishment than whatever they did deserve. You punished them one time, now you punished them again. So again, we can't be arbitrary, but we can't be capricious. And that generally happens with school activities or athletics or those kinds of things. We have to be careful that we don't do that. Extracurricular, like not letting them, suspending them and then not letting them come to the prom. No, we can't do, we can do one or the other. We can't do both. But we can't do both of those kinds of things as a disciplinary action. One of the things I like it when we work on bullying through athletics. A lot of times that catches kids' attention. Now everybody does understand that you are legally the law is on the books in North Carolina. Your school must have a bullying prevention program. Now a lot of districts do it as a district initiative. Now if you don't know what one looks like, under that weekly lesson when we did bullying, I had the template or a program that you would emulate a PowerPoint in there. But every school, whether it's school derived or district derived, must have an anti-bullying program component at their school. That's been since 2009. That is a requirement. So make sure you understand that. Now I want to get back to Heather. Where's Heather? We find her on my screen. There she is. Hey, Heather. Heather, what do you do for a living?
What do I do for a living?
Yes.
I'm a high school EC teacher.
That is
Make
correct.
sausage. She makes sausage.
You make sausage. Well, I knew Heather was a high school. You're at South Point. You're the EC teacher at EC teacher at South Point. And the reason
Yes.
why I ask is, could we substitute EC kids for Jimmy and Willie?
Yes.
What I find is it's almost acceptable anymore, and I don't know why, that we abridge the rights of exceptional children. That is becoming more and more a thing. That we will mainstream them maybe for a class or two, but we won't in other things, or we will abridge their rights, or won't let them participate, or we don't want them to do this or that or the other. I think the pendulum is swinging the wrong way on that one. And so, again, as I said, we could substitute, a Muslim like Razan, or we could, an Irish lady like my mother, or, a black person or whatever. But we could also, other protected class like exceptional children, or a 504, or an ESL kid. We must protect the rights of everybody, and we have to know where we're most vulnerable. As I just mentioned, one of the things that we have to be real careful about, especially in the middle school setting, is double jeopardy, being capricious, wanting to punish them in class and their athletics or their school activities. That's a biggie. But one of the things that I've noticed is we're quick to not worry about the rights of exceptional children. There's some belief out there that exceptional kids get all these exceptions, and that the rules are made to be broken by them, and so it's okay to discriminate against them. That is not the case. And so you're going to have to make sure that you're watching those kinds of things as well, that you don't catch yourself saying, well, we'll just do this or do that. Now, the last point that I want to bring up, this one came up last night in my class last night, and we had a rather long discussion on this one. You can't infringe upon the rights of other students, but what about the notion of Jimmy and Willie wanting to do an event during the day, a moment of silence, or some kind of an event during the day, that all the kids have to come to, and or they want a club, a extracurricular club. So I want a thumbs up or a thumb down vote. Up is yes and down is no. Should we allow Jimmy and Willie to have a club? Up for yes, down for no. All right. What about infringing on the rights of others to have a Pride Day where everybody has to participate? That would be a no. You say, but Dale, You want to uphold the rights of these? Yeah, but we can't do it at the expense of everybody else, though. That's the funny thing. We can go too far. We can go too far in our wokeness and go too far where we infringe. If we make everybody, if we make everybody do a gay pride day where everybody has to be out of class and go to assembly and all that, we're infringing upon their rights. So we have to be careful either way. We have to kind of pay attention and stay within our guidelines either way. So please remember that the statute that says we can't infringe upon the rights of others, that means regular ed or just regular kids as well. And so, yes, a voluntary club after school or whenever or if you have a club day schedule where kids have a sponsor and do that, that would be fine. But to have an activity where everybody had to participate in it, that would not be fine. That would be infringed upon their rights. So the two requests that Jimmy and Willie made, one is doable, the other is not. We don't just automatically acquiesce and say, yeah, we'll do whatever they say. No, doesn't work that way either. So we have to remember what the law is. We can't infringe on anybody's rights. And having a campus-wide mandatory event of any kind would do that. So that one's pretty simple. But we got to remember that. Club, yes. Event, no. All right. We got it. We're moving on. We're making good time. All right. So Wood, Savannah, and Laura, excuse me. My niece is Lauren. Laura.
I'm going to start off with a summary of the incident. So as we all know, the students were displaying an excessive amount of affection to each other during school, on school property. Though the students were only holding hands, they stated that they would not refrain from participating in public displays of affection. The principal began getting complaints from other parents about their PDA due to the students both being male and homosexuality being against their religion. They feel as though the school is condoning this mocking of their religion by allowing this behavior. It's also stated that the parents, that both their PDA and their relationship regarding attending the prom together were disturbances to the learning environment. So for question number 1, would you consider Mary Lou's comments a veiled threat? We responded yes, because she's not even being clear about what she is threatening, but she is alluding to the students not being allowed to attend prom or graduation if their behavior continues. She is also threatening the parents in the same way by pressuring them to talking sense into their children. This could be considered use of heckler's veto, as the principal is seeking to limit the students' freedom of speech and expression for fear of hostile reaction from the crowd that prohibits their speech or expression. The principal wants students to wait until after graduation to continue actions. Instead of doing this, she should utilize language that is consistent with the code of conduct from her district. What are Mary Lou's responsibilities under the law? Excessive display of affection. We looked at the CMS rules that you posted, code of conduct that you posted, Dr. Lamb. It breaks Rule 27, Part D of the CMS Student Code of Conduct. And since these are high school students, this offense carries the minimum consequence of Tier 2, with the max being a consequence of Tier 3. Her responsibility is to assign the appropriate consequences as aligned in the Student Code of Conduct. And her responsibility is not to discuss students or their offenses with anyone that would cause a violation of FERPA.
And number 3, how should Mary Lou respond to the concerns of Jerry and Cindy Hudson? And had she been assigning disciplinary consequences according to the student code of conduct, well, we just talked about that, like, you know, we're not going to violate FERPA, but we're sure that Jerry has seen the situation, that they're aware of the situation and it was being addressed. And she would not discuss any specifics that would violate FERPA. Number 4, should Mary Lou allow Willie and Jimmy to attend the prom as a couple? Yes, of course, it's equal protection under law. They should be allowed to attend the prom. This is any other couple. This is the 14th Amendment, so it's a pretty big deal. You know, this would be a pretty big violation if she did not allow them to. Also, Title IX does not allow for discrimination on the basis of sex, gender, sexual orientation, and so just you can't be discriminatory in that manner. And then we also cited Tinker versus Des Moines in 1969, that school officials cannot censor student expression unless that speech or expression will substantially disrupt school activities or invade the rights of others. Savannah, did I take yours?
No, I'm just figuring out how to unmute. I think, okay, I can. Okay. All right. So, 1 second, sorry. All right. So, ways that we feel like they could minimize addressing bullying and cyberbullying. Pretty much what everybody else has already mentioned about having school programs, clubs, being proactive versus reactive. Already have a gay straight alliance in place or a similar group, so having that ahead of time, again, going back to being proactive and not reactive. These are things that should be thought of ahead of time. The Speak Up app, which is an app that can be used to report those types of things, and you know, students are very familiar with using apps and technological things. Student access to hotlines, and we discuss as a group how important that is to have that posted not only virtually, but having these things posted physically where kids can see them as well, and not leaving everything up to the virtual world. Community outreach programs, then we had Title IX on there again, and then the school codes of conduct, having that outlined, what those consequences could be and what those expectations are. Somebody mentioned earlier in a previous group that, you know, all stakeholders should be aware of those things ahead of time. And that's also a good tool as an administrator to be able to refer back to, because it kind of covers you as long as you are, you know, going by those codes of conduct. And then our overall reflection is that Mary Lou needs to stick to the law and not try to handle issues, such as in this case, by using intimidation tactics. These conversations she had with students and their parents could easily be interpreted as prejudice, bigotry, which could get her into even more legal trouble. Students cannot be discriminated against due to their sexual orientation. However, they still have to follow the student code of conduct, just as straight students have to as well. So as Wood was talking about earlier, and Laura, that, you know, they and groups previously too mentioned this a lot as well, that, you know, she just wasn't aware, and if she was turning the blind eye to those behaviors until they got out of control. And I'm not really sure what the reason for that is, if it was because of their orientation, but she just was not doing. And even in the 2 conversations she had, in both of those conversations, she had enough to, you know, assign actions for what they had already done, or even quote the student code of conduct if it wasn't something that was very problematic at the time. And she didn't take any of those opportunities. And it just bothered us a lot that those little conversations, those veiled threats, can really get her into a lot more trouble because it can be misinterpreted.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. As a somewhat practicing Baptist, I don't sit on the back row. I sit on the row in front of the back row. But one of the things we find, especially in the Baptist church, we're pretty judgmental. But but I've often said, and I've heard this pretty much all my life, we judge ourselves by our intent. I intended to do this. I intended to be a better person. I intended to get up and go, and I intended, but we judge others by their actions. You know, we're a lot harder on others than we are on ourselves. Well, but where that emanates, that philosophy or that function, where that leads us in terms of school law is when you go to court, they don't care what your intent was. They want to know what your action was. You say, well, I didn't do anything. But again, going back to malfeasance, nonfeasance, misfeasance, nonfeasance, she was supposed to do something. As Savannah said, we don't know why she didn't. Doesn't matter why. Her intent does not matter when we go to the court of law. All it matters is, did you take action when you were supposed to? Nope. Well, then you're guilty of misfeasance. You're guilty of negligence. Off with your head. That's the notion here. We can only judge you by your actions, and yet that's how you'll be judged, or your inaction in this case. But that's a great point, Savannah made. We don't know why she didn't do this. Maybe she did. She was afraid because they were gay. She shouldn't. But that should not have anything to do with. These are the rules. We have to enforce them. It's always when you don't do the things you're supposed to, and then they get out of hand. You know, you let kids carry bandanas and get into the gang life. You know, even if they're just perpetrating. Then next thing you know, you got weapons, you got guns, you got violence. You let bullying go on, and all of a sudden, a kid brings a gun or a knife, or a kid kills himself. I mean, all these things, they start out little, and they grow big because we don't pay them any attention. We let them get out of control, regardless of what our intent was. That reminds me to share my screen. Back here, let me close that out. We can do it. So, just as a housekeeping matter, before we go any further, in our disciplinary data reporting manual, as I told you, the state says what infractions are. And here they are. Here are your bad ones that become bad ones because we didn't get to them when they were little ones. They became big ones. Right here. State says you can't do that. That will not be allowed in our schools. We're paying you. You know, and so if we're paying, and then to Laura's point, again, under Zoom session 7, if you dial up the CMS code of conduct, and I like, you know, actually, my group was part of when we did this. We separated the elementary and the secondary. But what we also did when we revamped this thing, I think that was in about 2010 when it started looking like this, my last year. We started grouping them together for ease for administrators. And so you can see attendance, all of these are related to attendance. And then if we go on down, what we're going to find is so So aggressive behavior. Here we go. Excessive display of affection right there. That's exactly right. So again, as you know, our legal chain here are what we call the rationale. Please remember, the state says you can't have this happening on our campuses. We're paying you. You know, people are paying for this. But then the consequence is determined by the code of conduct. And remember, the code of conduct might be written by the staff because that's what the central office is. Central office is the staff, the superintendent is the secretary to the board, and the central office staff is the staff that basically works for the school board. Now, the staff might put it together, but now the school board votes on these things. So it's adopted by your consequences are adopted by your local school board, not the infractions. State says what the infractions are. Then you get to decide what the consequences are, and they give you a range. And then you, as a school administrator, find the appropriate place in that range to assign that consequence to that child. If you don't do them all consistently, then you're arbitrary. If what we're talking about with Alex, if we assign the consequence from the code of conduct and we want the coach to run them until they fall over like dogs with their tongue hanging out, that would be capricious. That's too much. That's double jeopardy. So you got to know your rationale here, where this thing comes from. If somebody comes in and says, "Why are you bothering my kid about this?" This is not debatable. Now, you can debate what punishment, and you can appeal the punishment that I assigned, the consequence, but you can't appeal that, that inappropriate display of affection is a thing. State says it is. It's defined in the manual of things that are not allowable in state schools that receive state funding. Now, if you don't want to do that, then fine, then you won't get your check that month. But as long as the state is paying, you're to stop those things from happening in your building. It's just that simple. And trust me, when you get put on the watch list, they come out and watch you for those things. And you better not be letting that stuff happen in your building when they come and do those audit, and they audit your data. And just not reporting, we've already talked about, just not telling them, that won't work either. All right, Daphne, Charlene, and Angie.
So sorry. Okay, everybody can see it, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so going through the questions, would we consider Mary Lou's comment a veiled threat? According to the dictionary, a veiled threat is not expressed directly or clearly because you do not want your meaning to be too obvious. The way that she addressed the students on both occasions implied that there may be a present threat to them if they chose to continue on with dating and attending the prom. She never said that they could not attend, but she did recommend and encourage them to not attend prom together. And then she also asked them to consider holding off on continuing to date until after graduation. And then for North Carolina legislation in Article 29C, the School Violence Prevention Statute says basically that any pattern of gestures or written, electronic, or verbal communications, or any physical act or any threatening communication that takes place on school property at any school-sponsored function that creates or is certain to create a hostile environment by substantially interfering with or impairing a student's educational performance, opportunities, or benefits. And this basically falls under that because it would interfere with their opportunities at school if she would, by telling them not that they can't participate in things, basically. Her responsibilities under the law.
She is obligated, Mary Lou's obligated to protect the rights of all students. This includes protecting them from discrimination, harassment, and bullying. The different laws that Daphne's going to go into more detail about later are that same Article 29C, the school violence prevention, the First Amendment rights, their freedom of speech, and then Title IX regulations. 3 ways that schools and school employees have been held liable for bullying and harassment are for failure to supervise adequately so that a bully has an opportunity to get at the victim, failure to respond to known bullying in a reasonable manner, which is basically what Mary Lou has kind of done, so that the student is deprived of a constitutional right, such as the right to equal protection under the law, and for discrimination based on their membership in a class that's protected by law, in this case, like because their sexual orientation or gender identity type issues. How should Mary Lou respond to the concerns of Jerry and Cindy Hudson? So she needs to protect the rights of all students, so she can entertain the parental concerns. However, she cannot discuss particular students with anyone other than the legal guardians of those particular students. She can reiterate that the prom is for all, and that as long as students are not breaking any school rules or district level codes of conduct, they have the right to attend. And inform parents that the prom is optional and not a required event. So if parents choose not to let their children attend for any reason, that is their parental right, and the school will not intervene in that decision-making process. And then should she allow them to attend the prom as a couple? She absolutely has to basically allow them to attend the prom as a couple. When schools fail to respond appropriately in matters such as this, the Civil Rights Division, sorry, my dog is whining. She's distracting me. Basically, the OCR at the Department of Ed can intervene by enforcing federal laws that protect students from discrimination. And then Daphne's going to go into more detail here.
So here are the laws as it relates to this case study. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment or prohibiting free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. What it means is that the Supreme Court has said that students in public schools maintain their First Amendment rights to free speech, which means they have a right to be out, to voice their opinion about LGBT issues, and to organize peaceful protests such as a day of silence. They also have a right to take a same-sex date to the prom and dress and express themselves in a way that best matches their gender identity, based on the Tinker versus Des Moines as a key court case for reference. Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. What it says, no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the right of protection of the laws. What it means is that this guarantees equal protection under the law to all citizens, and it applies to public schools. All students have a federal constitutional right to equal protection, which means that schools have a duty to protect LGBTQ students from harassment on an equal basis with all other students. The key court case recognized in this is Nabonzi versus Polesny. Jamie Nabonzi's Ashland, Wisconsin school was found to have not done its duty in keeping him safe from anti-gay bullying. The law as it relates to this case study concerning Title IX of the Education Amendments, what it says, no person in the United States, on the basis of sex can be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. What this means is that the legislation covers all educational activities with the exception of sex-specific groups like sororities or the Boy Scouts, and it prohibits sex-based discrimination and gender-based harassment, including harassment on the basis of a student's failure to conform to stereotype notions of masculinity and femininity. In 2010, the Obama administration sent a letter to 15,000 school districts clarifying that the Title IX forbids gender-based harassment, and you can read that letter here. attached, and it is labeled as the Dear Colleague letter. In 2020, the Supreme Court in Bostic versus Clayton County concluded that discrimination based on sexual orientation and discrimination based on gender identity here inherently involve treating individuals equally. The final law we want to point out is the Equal Access Act. What it says is that it shall be unlawful for any public secondary school which receives federal financial assistance and which has a limited open forum to deny equal access or a fair opportunity to or discriminate against any students who wish to conduct a meeting within that limited open forum on the basis of the religious, political, philosophical, or other content of speech at such meetings. What does it mean is that if your school allows any extracurricular activities, as Dr. Lamb has already pointed out, it can't be during the school operational hours, but if it's extracurricular activities to form, it has to allow for the formation of a GSA. Additionally, your school may not impose special rules or restrictions on the GSA that are not imposed on other clubs. In the 2011 U.S. Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, wrote a Dear Colleague letter clarifying that GSAs are protected under the Equal Access Act, and you can read that Dear Colleague letter connected here.
All right, this is showing a snapshot from the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, and we're just looking at it from the perspective of antecedent behaviors that would not have been addressed and could have led to legal repercussions for this principle. If you're looking at the first snapshot, you will see that 92% of students within North Carolina would have heard the word gay being used in a negative way. Example, he's so gay, and that probably would not have been addressed from the classroom level, and so that could become an issue. If we're looking at in terms of the type of infractions that are committed in terms of assaults and harassment, you will notice that the main type of harassment comes as verbal harassment, where 72% have been reported to have been sexually harassed based on their orientation or sexual orientation. This is followed by physical harassment in orange here. That's the second type or most prevalent type of discrimination in our schools, followed by physical assault. And in terms of discrimination most commonly reported in North Carolina, we noticed that expressing PDA in school is not 32% has been reported. Those students who are prevented from expressing PDA in school, we now know it's a part of the school code of conduct that excessive PDA should not be allowed, or if this is permitted, then it could become an issue. Could we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. The NCDPI position on this is that in an effort to protect transgender students, North Carolina public schools are now being directed to include a student's preferred name on most of their school records instead of just their legal name. And the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction announced in March 2021 that PowerSchool, a widely used student information system, will introduce the new preferred name. So this would also give a level playing field for all students, regardless of their sexual orientation. And takeaways from the presentation. All students should be able to learn in a safe environment, free from discrimination and harassment. And the Civil Rights Division stands with LGBTQ students and will fight for or to protect their rights to an education regardless of who they are or whom they love. And this is coming from Kristen Clark, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Department of Justice. Another takeaway, the Department of Education strives to ensure that all students, including LGBT students, have access to supportive, inclusive school environment that allows them to learn and strive in all aspects of their educational experience. Federal law prohibits discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, and we are here to help schools, students, and families ensure that these protections are in full force. And this is coming from Susan B. Goldberg, Acting Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights Department of Education. And that concludes our presentation for this evening.
Excellent. Excellent job tonight, folks. Couldn't be more pleased. Very well. Did very well tonight. All right, so let's talk about next week and finishing out things going forward. We talked about these, our activity for next week. We're going to talk about liability. So your homework assignment for next week is this. I want you to jot down just in a notepad. Now, this is not a don't write me a treatise or War and Peace. Just I want you to jot down 2 things from your summer experience that you did not know. And hopefully they would be related to the law or harassment, or 2 things you didn't know that you found out this summer. And then 2 things that you did know and that were reinforced or that you knew to make the right decision because 2 things you did know. 2 things you didn't know that you found out in terms of liability, law, malfeasance, malpractice, misfeasance, nonfeasance. That liability part, that legal piece, 2 things you didn't know and 2 things that you did know. Write those down because I want to hear from you next week, or when we we'll conclude our content next week, and then the following week we'll do our final case studies, which kind of encompasses everything. I want to remind you of our last town hall for the summer, which will be Monday, this coming Monday, the 18th at 6 o'clock. I know that's a little bit early, but we've got some folks who have class at 7 afterwards. And so I'm going to do it at 6. Shouldn't last but an hour. We'll talk about interviewing. We will, somebody's trying to call me. We'll do an hour and we'll kind of close out shop for the summer on the advisement piece on what to do and not to do, but we'll be talking about interviewing. So if you'd like to join me Monday at 6, this invite again is under interviewing materials, and I will talk about the 4 types of interviews. If you can't come, start with the 4 types of interviews that kind of explains the others, but I've got the rest of these if you work through these. But I would love to see you on Monday at 6 o'clock on this link right here. All right, so again, next week content, you've got your assignment, 2 things you learned, 2 things that you already knew. And then your last case study will be due in 2 weeks from tonight. So let me stop my share. And I'll throw the floor open for anything that you want to discuss tonight. Anything that you need to know, any questions you have, any concerns, anything that you need to share with me before we go. All right. If you do good, you get out early. That's the way the world works. It's a good thing to remember. You get done faster. The better you do, the faster you get done. I will see you all hopefully Monday night. If not, I'll see you next Wednesday. Everybody have a good week. Thanks for playing along.